Welcome out to It's All Been Tracked Before. This time, lessons. Yeah, lessons. Hey, I'll give you a lesson, or you can learn some lessons. Follow us on Facebook. It's All Been Tracked Before. Lots of fun, very funny, great place to interact with us. We'll talk with you folks and lots of other folks we don't even know are listening. We assume they're listening, but we love interacting with them and lots of fun stuff there, and keeps you up to date on what we're up to over here in case you lose the thread. Lessons. That's a lesson for you. These are lessons on It's All Been Tracked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tracked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. We're here to talk about the Next Generation episode, Lessons, in which Picard falls in love and stays that way for the rest of the series. It completely changes the show. First impressions.
My first impression is this is probably not going to be a very, very memorable title. To match with the content of the episode.
Should be something like One Night in Stellar Cartography or something like that, right?
It's already an improvement.
Is there in Stellar Cartography no beauty?
Yeah, see, now we got it.
I mean, the original series was great at titles. You have to give them that.
They were.
What were your first impressions of this episode, though?
I don't know. I really don't. It's hard. I think I saw the synopsis going into it, so it pretty much you could see it being plotted out like Stellar Cartography.
Yep.
Beginning.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Keith. Although I mean, there were some zigs, places I thought it would go predictably that it didn't. So that was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, I think overall I liked it, even with its obvious constraints. I think. I mean, Jimmy alluded to it right off the bat that.
Yeah.
Picard's going to stay in love forever. He's finally found that person.
The one, yeah.
The one.
She joins as a lead cast member from here on out.
Yeah, exactly. So
the famous Mrs. Picard that everyone always talks about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not super impressed with it. I think some of that is modern sensibilities of knowing that you have to reset everything at the end of the hour. So I don't get invested in the love story. Like, I'm immediately just. I'm not even going to try because I know that it's going to break my heart. And it was well acted, but there were some things that weren't as well written as I would have liked. So
yeah, I think all those constraints definitely fought against what I thought. Like you said, Jim, I think it was written fine. The acting was good. That was all good, but I think just the constraints of we've got an hour. We're going to kind of rush some things.
Take our time with the music lessons.
Yeah. There were so many double entendre, double meaning things going on. Not all double entendre. Some were sexual, obviously, but so many double meaning. I feel like every line had like, oh, it means this and it means that, including the title, which again, love lessons or music lessons would have been more interesting than lessons.
Duet would have made a great title. Had that not been a DS9 episode coming up that's really good called Duet. In just a few weeks, we'll be reviewing it. But
there's also the 80s staple private lessons. Where am I? Here we go. Air quotes.
And that makes me think of the line from the 80s classic Better Off Dead, language lessons, which the language of love, which don't they say, I think one of the double meaning or double entendres is I look forward to our next duet or something like that. Or you guys played a duet or.
Well, let's jump to the beginning of the episode. Yeah. Picard comes on the bridge. Data's on night shift because Data doesn't need to sleep, so he's probably on night shift a lot. Makes sense. Although, Data has hobbies, so not all the time would he want to be on duty. But it's 3 a.m., apparently, and Picard is up, ready to work. A little bit lonely, yeah. Which
I was thinking it. Matchbox 20.
Matchbox 20, yeah. It's 3 a.m. I must be lonely.
Gotcha. I mean, I think he is a little bit lonely, even though that's not really played up. I think that would be part of the reason he'd be open to romance. Mm-hmm. But so his replicator's not working. He can't get his Earl Grey tea, so he goes down to Stellar Cartography because that's where the holdup is, because they're doing something special. And didn't bother to inform the captain of this.
Right.
And it's dark, which is super creepy.
Uh-huh.
And the woman that we don't see is like being super rude to him because, of course, she hasn't turned around and realized it's the captain. So right away, you're like, oh, I know where this is going.
I love that Picard, because I wrote this down, like, she's like, well, you've just wasted 4 hours. He's like, you could have locked the door.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was
so they do have locks. They just never use them.
Lock the door, genius. But,
well, and the fact that she's using so many computer resources, and obviously this was pre-planned, right. So to do at night, you'd think that would be something the captain had to approve or at least informed about.
I thought that too, that he had to have been informed at some time. Although I likened it to this happens a lot, an IT update or upgrade at work, where it's like, we're going to do it overnight. And, some of those I know are coming up if it affects me, if it doesn't affect me directly. But if you're the captain, it's going to affect you. But it just reminded me of those where it's like, oh, hey, we hit a snag. So we told you 7, but it's going to be 9. We hope. It's like, well, I can't do anything. Yeah, sorry. What's this doing? That I don't even care about that. But I will say this was the first one that I thought, when they're like, well, communications black out and this isn't working. And I immediately was like, oh, this is going to come back to screw them. But it was just the whole ship they were taking over. So.
Yeah, I was almost surprised that did not factor in, but not in a bad way. Like, okay, no, it's a smaller story. I appreciate that. They didn't feel the need to put a danger at that point. That would ticking clock.
At first I was like, who do these guys in stellar cartography think they are? And then I was like, I guess if you're traveling the stars, that's pretty important.
I will say every time I hear stellar cartography, I remember an article I read for the movie Star Trek Generations where they were talking about how they built this awesome stellar cartography set that's on the Enterprise D, and it's a really cool set. This looks nothing like that. And I'm like, well, I guess they got a major upgrade after the series, but we'll see that when we get to the film. This officer that's the cause of his headache turns around, Lieutenant Commander Nella Darren, played by Wendy Hughes. I will say IMDb, her bio on IMDb says she is an accomplished actress who has won over 13 major awards. She's been called one of the world's greatest actresses with the beauty and talent to become an international star. She is Australian, and she died in 2014 at the age of 61. Best known for Return to Eden, My Brilliant Career, Snowy River, The McGregor Saga, and The Man Who Sued God. I've heard of none of those, but she was a very good actress.
Yeah, I enjoyed her. Cynically, when I saw she had passed, and with that deep voice, I just thought, lung cancer. But she did die of cancer, but I don't know what form. But either way, I'm not victim blaming. I'm just saying, with that voice, I just decided she was a smoker. It was kind of Suzanne Pleshette-esque. I know I'm going way back for most of our listeners to the 70s, so. But or 60s even. But anyway,
I do too. I think it's hard to set up a relationship for the captain, right? Because you don't want him to abuse his power in any way. It had to feel totally mutual. If anything, she had to be a little bit not aggressive, but definitely indicate her interest before he could make a move, which she did. Lieutenant Commander is a high enough rank that it doesn't seem super inappropriate. Like, she's a department head and she's new on the ship, so it makes sense that Picard didn't get to know her before this time. So all of the mechanics behind it I appreciated and liked. And there was immediate flirting between them, immediate chemistry, and of course she looked a little bit like Beverly Crusher.
I had that same thought too. I went there too, and my first my only fashion note, at least for the top. Her hair was very complicated, I'll say, for lack of a better term, but looked like a lot of work. But I had the same thing. Like, she has kind of a Beverly feel to her
in the face and in the mannerisms, the way she carried herself. The hair was a little more Leah Brahms, but of course it was redhead because Picard likes redheads. Most of the women we see Picard interested in are redheads. My alternate episode was, why not just do this with Crusher? Like, something finally prompts them. And that would be more dramatic. And then the fact when they decide to call it off after that bit and then having them get used to the old arrangement, that would be an interesting story.
I had that thought too, because they just went with Crusher is obviously a little bit jealous about this.
Yeah.
And I had that same thought too. It's like, why wouldn't that have been what happened here? And because I know they have history or whatever, but they have, her husband and all that stuff. But I'm with you. And we've stand for that for
forever
since we started. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a shame. I think one of the biggest shames of the series is they never go there in the movies either, and it's just not even in Star Trek Picard. Although maybe season 3 will correct that, but just this. There's so many easy ways to do it without and still reset it, but at the time, we could actually believe they may not reset it if it was Crusher. You know, we might actually believe it's going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I appreciated that, we got the glimpses of, Crusher changing feelings about this thing throughout the episode. Although we didn't get a lot, it was just in glances at it. But
I think this also would have worked better as a subplot spread over several episodes rather than a main plot.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It made it a very different episode, and it made it, again, that, we've all kind of touched on it, that like, well, that's what this episode's going to be about, and we know where it's going to end. We know it's going to end in 45 minutes. We just don't know. And I will say, I was sure she was dead. I had already written notes about her death. I think
it's better she didn't die. I really do.
Oh, I agree. I appreciate
Not just because I like the character. I think the story and the emotion for Picard and making the decision he makes is more effective without her dying.
Them breaking up because of, all of that is much more interesting than, well, she's dead. And but she still gets asked that question. I know I'm jumping way ahead. The question of, well, would you have blamed yourself? And I think everyone's like, yeah, of course he would have. He already was. He was.
Yeah.
Which, whether that's for her ego or whatever, but she actually said, I didn't want you to be blaming yourself.
Yeah.
Very much. So yeah, I'm again, that was at least a couple times they subverted my expectations.
Picard early on lies to Crusher about Darren, which, I mean, that tells me, there's definitely something between Picard and Crusher, and he feels a little guilty about stepping out of it, in my opinion. Yeah. I do think they don't have, like, we're committed to each other, but I would not be surprised if they hook up occasionally, they're friends with benefits, and this now Picard's pursuing a romance that affects your friend with benefit. Maybe they are friends without benefits, but still, he obviously sees something more than just plain friendship if he's lying to her about Darren. I
definitely had people or women who I hung out with a lot who, once I started dating somebody, we stopped hanging out for just similar kind of reasons.
Again, would have been more effective if that had been followed up upon. But
I did like when they're having the dinner. And just to back up, speaking of foreshadowing, when as soon as Data's like, "Hey, don't forget my Chopin concert," I'm like, "Oh, so this is going to be, an element of the episode, which is fine, setting it up." Crusher says, "Oh yeah, I met her. I did her physical. I like her. She's very forthright, and she does a weird hand motion of like a fist, like a Klingon salute kind of thing, which I enjoy." Picard's like, "We got to get to that concert." Crusher leaves like a full plate of food there. But I guess if it's replicated, do you not worry about the food as much?
No, you won't worry about it. I don't think. Picard's really humble about his musical talent, which, I mean, he played that flute for decades. He should be. Yeah. He should have some confidence in his skill. It's the flute. I recognized it immediately, and as much as I complain about how the show doesn't do continuity and ongoing stories, that's continuity, and that's an ongoing story.
I did like that allusion back to that. He decides to tell her the inner light story, and I feel like in my mind, for him, that's like, I have to tell you this, and that's the make or break, fight or flight part of the relationship. If the woman's like, okay, cool, then all right, they can have a future, and I can see someone who's like, what's wrong with you? I'm out of here. That's crazy.
Well, that's a serious part of his self. Yeah. So if she's not, I mean, that's something you have to reveal to any romantic partner, I think.
Yeah. I think it's, hey, I'm a furry. It's not exact. That's not analogous in any way, but it's everyone's had things like, well, everyone's got things like, well, this is what you need to know about me.
Right. I mean, it was a traumatic experience. It helped shape his personality. Traumatic and beneficial for growth. I don't know, but it's. I guess, and I think that's probably also why they justify using the flute in any real way, is because they're going to explain it, so it's fine if you hadn't seen that episode.
I wrote that, I might have mentioned this in the episode, that, he's conquered the recorder, the space recorder, which I feel like nobody in the galaxy has ever played a recorder right, but I haven't heard anybody other than elementary kids play it, so school kids, including myself. I guess junior high. I think we played it in junior high. So he's gotten very good.
Well, she talks about you're not used to playing with anyone. And he's like, just the computer. And that whole line about, I may not be as precise as the computer, but I'm sure it'll be more enjoyable. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep.
At the same time, like, she probably means he's doing things with the computer sexually as well, like Riker in The Holodeck.
Yes.
Would she rather have a personal partner?
Yeah, she played the piano for the concert. And I'm like, I was like, oh, on the one hand, it's like, I wonder why they don't have like a more futuristic keyboard. And I was like, but I get it. You want that more tactile, old school. And then when she popped out the more modern keyboard, I'm like, okay, I thought that would be around before.
Plus, have keyboards really changed that much in the last 500 years?
No, not really.
I mean, I know we have electronic ones now, but they look and operate the same way as a... Yeah. Of course, they devolve into Frere Jacques because this show is not going to shell out for music or write original music. That was way too silly for me.
I thought it was an interesting choice.
Teaching him to improv on Frere Jacques and then her praising him like a teacher and him like taking pride in Frere Jacques. It was way too silly. It did not feel... They needed to spend a little bit of money on music in this episode because it did not work for me. It really took me out of it.
I thought, hey, jump into one of the songs he learned on, in his inner light experience. And then when he played that, I thought that was a call out to Star Trek 5 when they sang row, row, row your boat. They're obsessed with the rounds. In the 23rd century, rounds make a big comeback.
Copyright-free rounds. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they come back around. That's how they...
Picard Riker when he's trying to talk to him, which I did think was fun.
I enjoyed that exchange too because I thought, is this going to be kind of a forced thing? But it was more of a, hey man, I'm only bothered because it wasn't like you need to figure something out. It was just like, yeah, this is the thing's fun. It's like, well, okay, well, but I trust you. When he said like, I've always trusted you. I've always, I thought that was a nice one.
Yeah, I mean, jumping ahead to that situation where Picard tells Riker to just do his job because he trusts him. Yeah. I mean, I get why Riker might feel a little uncomfortable in this situation. However, I don't think Riker handles it very well or professionally. First of all, he's pretty rude to her about the promotion. And yes, she did wrong, but would he do that to any other officer? Maybe so, because we've seen him be rude to other people.
Yeah, I thought that too.
But he might have been overcompensating too to make sure that he wasn't showing favoritism.
But then I think of how Riker interacts, and normally he has no problem shutting somebody down and being professional about it. And I just think he should have done the same thing with her and to make a deal out of it. I think it was Riker making the deal out of it. I don't think there was a deal to be made there.
Her behavior was a little off to me. She was kind of moving in and being persistent and kind of in an inappropriate way, kind of closing the distance and kind of.
I think the way they timed it in the episode made it feel like, oh, she suddenly decided she can do these things. But I also agree with you, Keith, because I was like, I rarely get that close to somebody that I'm not. It's not named Colleen or a cat. I know at work.
Well, that's a lot of people, though.
Well, I do not get that close to people at work generally. I don't think. I mean, I'm not involved in that work.
She's just one of those people that invade your personal space. It's just a character trait.
She's a close talker.
Yeah.
But he told her no, essentially, or I'm going to work on it, and she just kept at him twice.
Well, he was kind of rude about he kind of blew her off. So I think she was like, I believe strongly in this. Let me sell you on what I'm trying to do.
And I also think she would have done that whether she had just started a relationship with the captain or not. But the way they timed it made it feel like, she's feeling, who is this sorceress?
Darren blew the secret to Crusher as they check it out, just very casually. Oh yeah, the captain and I were up all night. Okay.
Yeah. So much for passing the bedtime.
It was so uncomfortable.
It was.
I mean, at this point, they've been dating long enough. When they've had a discussion, Picard's like, I'm close to Beverly. Mm-hmm. I should tell her.
Yeah.
I do think part of that's Picard being neglectful, because if she knows that Picard's close to Beverly, she probably assumes Crusher already knows.
That's true, too. Yeah.
So the most acoustic spot on the entire ship is in the intersection of two Jeffries tubes. But couldn't you just make a perfect acoustic room on the holodeck?
Well, that's not how holograms work. You see,
although it was kind of fun that Data and Geordi just heard music through the tubes and then did not investigate it further. I want another alternate episode where they're crawling through the tubes looking for the source of this music for hours.
Yeah.
And never find them.
I thought they were going to go into a little thing of is something wrong with Geordi that he's hearing things?
No, then they get Barclay involved, crawling in the tube. Barclay, diagnose what's going on here. Is it a rip in subspace? We heard music, we swear.
Yeah, there's so many alternate episodes that can come out of that. Sure.
Yeah. The kiss was nice in the tube.
Mm-hmm. I did like the way they got to that with, it stopped.
Yeah.
The music stuff.
I had a real problem with her reaction when Picard turns professional in the turbo lift, because I feel like she should understand immediately why he did it. And if she wants to talk to him about it, fine. But to start acting offended by it seemed ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of those where it's like, we're going to expedite this quickly because we only have 45 minutes. So this would have happened at some point, but we're just going to make it happen right now.
True.
Because the arc feels like it's a week and a half maybe. And if it had been 5 months, then I think maybe it doesn't feel as fast.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. They had no problem just saying exposition. So they could have been like, well, it's been 3 weeks since we've been doing this, or whatever. 3 star weeks since we've been doing it.
I did appreciate the scene between Picard and Troy telling him to go for it and being supportive. Yes. I like it.
I had just written down who is the commander of HR, and then I was like, Troy. Yeah, it was literally, I wrote it down, and then I looked up, and he's like, can I talk to you, Commander Troy? I'm like, oh, she is.
Well, I think it would be her job to evaluate whether he was acting inappropriately or within. They said there's no regulations against the captain dating, which means they trust their bosses more than we do now. Yeah. Rightly so, because humanity comes a long way, and now we should not trust them. But I don't know. I feel like there should be some regulations governing how you go about that situation, because there's going to be a power imbalance just by definition if he's the captain.
Right. And
even though I don't believe they should ban dating entirely, they just should have some guidelines on how that would work.
See, I don't think that they necessarily mean that there are no rules whatsoever. I think they just mean that there are no prohibitions against it. When they were saying,
or no prohibitions against the way he's going about it, where it seems extremely consensual. Yeah. We get to a point really quickly where Picard doesn't want her to do her duty. And to me, I guess you can excuse people for love and emotion, but I feel like Picard's better than that and would not have tried to prevent her from doing her duty, even if it was dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, he's a professional and he goes into danger for his job. He should have the same respect for her, right?
Yeah. I didn't understand how stellar cartography was involved. Is that just because she had this special deflector?
She had special knowledge, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
I thought for a second it was slightly inappropriate, but maybe it wasn't, that Picard was on the bridge monitoring all the communications on the surface, like listening into Riker and her conversation. I mean, I guess as captain, if you've got a dangerous mission, you should stay appraised, and that's an easy way to do it. But at the same time, it felt a little bit intrusive. I assume he does that with Holloway missions. We just haven't seen it before. And I wish we'd seen it before, so it didn't feel so jarring. Ordering her to stay in the danger, and she's one of the 2 teams left behind. That's good drama. That was fine. And even, like, she seems a little bit upset at first, as she should be, like, just from, standpoint. But then it's really weird when they're like, okay, we found some more survivors. We're being up. Picard goes down to the room. A whole group of people are there. His crewmen. And he doesn't say anything to them. He just stands there looking dejected. He's not like, oh, I'm glad you're okay. Welcome back. Thanks, Captain.
I had that thought, too, because when she's like, well, he's talking about how glad he was that she survived. And, well, what if I hadn't, and all that stuff. And he's like, I've lost crew members before. And I'm like, you just did. Just talk about the ones you just lost.
Eight people died on the surface there.
And I know I've said this about TOS, which there are certainly episodes where Kirk's like, well, doesn't even talk about the 5 people that just got blown out of space. But when he does address the people that he lost, Shatner makes me believe. I mean, I have to mention it because it's been several weeks. Balance of Terror, of course, is my favorite one. As far as favorite, it's my favorite time where it's sad about dead people. But there are definitely other episodes where he definitely shows great concern and gets into this. Actually, kind of this episode gets back to the "I'm married to my ship" kind of thing, which is kind of where they end. And actually, Lieutenant Commander Darren is also kind of like, I'm married to what I do too. I'm not gonna. And I loved it when she turned it back on him at the end of like, well, you could just stop being captain and come with me. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, because I didn't think she was going to do it. She did. I was like, thank you. You guys get
it was definitely unreasonable for him to even make that ask, honestly.
Yes.
Those were the parts that felt out of character to me. And you could argue maybe he's just not that experienced romantically, so he makes those immature decisions, but it feels out of character from the rest of what we know about Picard.
And I felt like he knew she was going to say no before he even finished it.
Even couching it that way, it still felt disrespectful.
Yeah.
Picard talks about he would shut down and music wouldn't bring him joy anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. Again, he acts like his first girlfriend a bit in this episode, that she's his first.
Yeah.
And maybe just not becoming of a man of his age and accomplishments.
I was going to say maybe it's his first long time, but he talks about he was married for 50 years or whatever, and to that woman on
what? Okay. You're right.
He's obviously been involved with some other. But.
And good for her for refusing the long distance offer. That was the more appropriate choice for him to make, rather than the quitting. But good for her.
Well, and I like the when they're like, "Well, we'll see each other," that kind of stuff, and they didn't say it with like overwhelming sadness and hanging over, but it kind of conveyed that, it might happen, but we're done here, right? This is it, kind of a thing, which I kind of like. I thought it added some pathos to it.
Yeah, agreed.
Actually.
So going back to the TOS thing you were mentioning before, I remember the thing with where some godlike being was turning the crew people into those cubes or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And they, crushed one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Herc's reaction to finding out it was the woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, glad you're okay, buddy, but
yeah, definitely.
That reminds me of I can't remember if it actually happened on the Orville, or if it's just a meme where she's like, there's lots of families down there. And he's like, yeah, and probably lots of single people too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love those.
Just as the concert's starting, I wrote down, I'm already missing Lieutenant Commander Darren, because I knew we only had so much more time with her. I knew that was going to be it, and so.
Yeah. So the only other thing I want to cover is it was directed by Robert Weimer. He's directed before, so we've talked about him, but he hasn't directed a lot. So it was written by Ronald Wilkerson and Jean-Louise Matthias. They also wrote Imaginary Friend, which was a Data episode. Was that Data episode, or was that the little kid?
That was the little kid.
That was the little kid. Yeah. Never mind. That wasn't Data episode. That was the creepy kids. I did not care for that one. Yeah. And wrote Schisms, which was the falling asleep, the nightmare, where they recreated the whole torture bed when they're falling asleep.
So this is the best episode they wrote.
So far. We still have one more that the two of them wrote called Lower Decks. That's pretty regarded.
3.5 seasons.
I'm pretty sure that animated show is inspired by this Next Gen episode, because it is like following 4 ensigns on Lower Decks. Cool. But it's just an episode. It's in the 7th season. It's in the final season. Then they also wrote 2 episodes of Voyager, but we'll get to that. One of them wrote 3 episodes, but together they wrote 2 episodes of Voyager, so we'll get to those as well. But one of them is called Learning Curve, which could have been the title of this episode.
Yeah.
The other Voyager episode they wrote is Fair Trade, which could also be the title of this episode, right? That was a bad joke about the whole how Riker might have viewed it. But anyway, they're not the stellar writers. I'm kind of surprised they let them write so many episodes. But, you got 24 or 26 a year to do.
Yeah. And
it wasn't the worst episode by far. It just wasn't great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of I think the constraints of us knowing
the format. Yeah,
it was set for this time. Because I thought the scenes themselves were good, and their chemistry was good. And I did enjoy. Well, I was going to say there wasn't a big threat, but there was eventually.
So they plotted a lot of stars, but didn't hang any moons.
Correct.
Oh, boo!
Yes.
Modern episodes, one would be she plays the bongos and not keyboards, which I think
it would be entertaining for sure.
Would have made her even more interesting.
Or the slide whistle or something like that.
Yeah. My other one is more, and I guess my brain is on a balance of terror, as it often is. The other couple that was on Deflector Team 6 with Darren, because she's talking to Picard and is like, this is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And in the background, you see the two of them kind of hugging. And it could have just been, hey, we're comforting each other because we're on the crew, we're humans, and blah, blah, blah. We're people, creatures, they don't have to be. But in my mind, I'm like, I think I want to believe they're a couple. because I even think the one is Crewman Day. When she and Darren come off, I feel like Darren's comforting her, like, yeah, we just lost. Now I feel bad. I don't have the other guy's name. But anyway, I would have liked to see their arc through the episode, and then it ends up, ultra sad, obviously. But which is where I thought it was going to end for Picard, as I mentioned earlier. I thought but I would have liked to see what they were doing. Which again, I guess alludes to Lower Decks coming up later. Just one more comment on Crewman Ding, who obviously I paid close attention to. No actress, unknown. Even Memory Alpha doesn't have an actress. And she didn't have a line, but she had a lot of face time. So.
Somebody's cousin was hanging around set that day.
yeah.
I don't know. Who was your annoyance?
I'm the entire stellar cartography section.
I'm gonna go with
your annoyance. I'm curious.
Didn't get done on time. They were lousing up the whole ship. It just seemed unnecessary.
Okay.
And lock the door. Lock the door if you don't want people coming.
I mean, that's what Picard said.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose Picard for all the times he acted like a teenager in his first relationship. That bothered me. Felt out of character. Yeah. And then disrespecting her at the end by asking her to quit her career for him. Keith?
That was good. I was going to go with her, actually.
Really? Why?
Yeah, the beginning scene, like Stephen was saying, and of course the close talking in the hallway. I really think she was crowding Riker on both occasions, really, and kind of being a little bit too, I would say, aggressive, actually, about not accepting the answers he was giving her.
I thought she was going to kiss him.
That would have been a very different episode had she kissed Riker there. Okay, who are we having a drink with?
Darren, Lieutenant Commander Darren. She seems fascinating.
Totally agree. I think most of the missteps were on Picard's part, not hers. Other than arguably the Riker stuff, I'm having a drink with Darren.
Yeah.
Smart, intelligent, capable, and beautiful.
I would with Dang, but in my world,
she's dead.
In my galaxy, she needs time to breathe. I'm not going to move right in on that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't want to be there for her, and then eventually, I'm just there.
Probably Beverly.
I mean, Picard wasn't good to her either.
Yeah.
That's even more of being there for her. That's actually the Seinfeld reference. They're breaking up. Just saying.
Yeah, but I've seen that show that he's there for her and he thinks that he's entitled then to date her, but she's still not interested and only sees him as the friend. And,
yeah.
Then she goes back to the guy that spurned her. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. Wrecking the episode. It's hard.
We need to put that emoji in this cell that Jimmy just made with just putting his hands up like that shrug guy. Just like whatever. Just that's the rank.
I do want to make a quick note from my favorite Tumblr. Make it so. Fashion it so. They have a picture of Lieutenant Commander Darren. It just says Lieutenant Beautiful reporting for duty.
Let's start with a fistful of datas. I'm going to go below a fistful of datas. I thought that one was more fun.
I guess so. Yeah.
I was going to go above, but
Steven, above is Face of the Enemy. Would you go above that?
Oh no, that one was so crazy. I love it. So yeah.
I think I wanted that one below a fistful of datas, but you guys put it above. So you'll stop there. Okay.
We're in a good spot, I think. Here.
Keith, let's see how low we want to go.
Hand over fist, I would say.
Below a fistful of datas is Birthright Part 2. I feel like that's pretty comparable, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think I'd still go below it.
Yep.
Below that is Man of the People. I want to go above that.
Oh, fine.
That's the line for me. I think Man of the People is where this season gets bad. Although Rascals got put under there. Oh, yeah, I did hate that too, didn't I? Like every time I think of Rascals, I'm like, that wasn't bad. And then I'm like, no, we didn't like it. It wasn't good.
It's the name that makes you think it's fun. And
right. Oh, the crew is kids. I forgot how bad they actually executed that idea.
Yeah.
Next week, back to Deep Space Nine for Vortex. A man named Croden tells Odo he can take him to a place where aliens, much like Odo himself, exist, which would help Odo find out where he truly comes from. I think that's interesting. That's the episode description, because that more seemed the subplot that the plot was there.
I have thoughts on. I will have thoughts on that next week. I have.
I mean, isn't the whole murder plot and everything that A story and the Odo stuff was more the interesting character development?
I think that's what I think it's the bait and switch. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about next week then.
Yeah.
Until then,
I thought of an alternate episode.
Go, do it.
It's you got Kake doing the captain's log at the end, essentially. Going about, and thankfully Darren was okay. And also 8 people died. Whatever.
But they were just security officers.
Yeah.
They were just stellar cartography. Nobody cares about them.
Yeah.
Until then, live long.
And keep on deflecting.
And quid pro quo.
And prosper.
Sorry. Quid pro quo, Clarice.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?